So the topology says you need to build this. It's very simple. We need to build exactly this one, but there are a lot of commands. And all the IP addresses are available to you. So if we go here down, they tell us which switch and which routers we need to use. So one router, which is 1941, one switch, which is Cisco 2960. So what I'm going to do, we need to go to routers, 1941. We'll take 1941 here. Then we go to switch. We take 2960. And now I need two BCs. And I drag two BCs, one here and one there. So the router, please go ahead and do this. The router model is 1941 as explained to you here. The switch is 2960 and that's it. And two BCs. To do things perfectly or without any problems, I'm going to change the names even if the BC is here to make it BCA and BCB exactly the same way like the topology. Now cabling should be done exactly the same way we see in the topology here. And for cabling, we will use the same, let me just make it smaller here. We will use the same port numbers to be sure we did the same thing. So BCA to switch, straight cable from BCA, fast Ethernet, to the port FA06. Next, I need to connect the switch FA05 to the router G01. So I go here, 05 to the router G01. If you connect it to other port, this is a problem. Then for BC to the router, you can use straight, but it might not work for all routers. Connecting BC directly to a router, we said before, although it's rarely done, but you connect the BC directly to the router using crossover cable. So I will connect BCB using a crossover cable to G00. So according to what we see here in the image, we connected the cables as you see here, G00. Tamam? Router ports are very important to know. Mashi? So the cabling is ready. The cabling is ready. And next we will be configuration. Once you finish cabling, you can start with configuration. For IP addresses, we first need to know the router addresses. The most important thing is the router ports. Most important thing is the router ports. Because we need to know the gateway of BCB and the gateway of PCA. It must be the same port of the LAN. S1 LAN is connected to G01 and BCB is connected to G00. So if you look at the table here, the router port G00 has this address and G01 has this address, and BCA, of course, in the same network of the router, and BCB has this network also. BCB default gateway is the IP address of the port G00, and BCA default gateway is the router address of port G01. So to just do things quickly here, we can go to, for example, start from the router. I can go from the router here. Of course, when you are asked about the router, just type no. I need to configure the IP addresses of the router as you see here as given in the table. Enable conf t to go to the conf mode. I need now to configure the IP address of G00, interface G00, IP address must be exactly 1,000,000% exact IP address, 192.168.0.1, 255.255.255.0, no shut. I am done with the port of the router port G00. I now can go to G01, interface G01, IP address. I get the IP address from the table, 192.168.1.1 this time, 255.255.255.0, no shut. So now the router ports are configured with IP addresses. Both ports are configured. If you want to make sure, just click here on the router, come out of the config mode, and use the command that we always said is going to be very useful. Show IP interface brief. If you look at show IP interface brief, you find that G00 is given this IP address and G01 is given this address. Next, we need to configure the IP addresses of the PCs. Very simple, the IP addresses of the PC. I will use them from the table. BCA 192.168.1.3. The gateway is the router port we just configured. So I'll go to BCA. The address is 192.168.1.3. The default gateway is 192.168.1.1. BCB, the same thing. I go to desktop, 192.168.0.3. Sorry, again I entered wrong one, 192.168.0.3, and the default gateway is the router port of that LAN, 01. So I am done with all IP addresses according to the table. They didn't ask me to do anything for the switch so far, no IP addresses. I configured IP addresses for the router, the PC, and the two PCs in both sides. So if I scroll down here, okay, I have already configured the IP addresses, subnet mask for both PCs. I need now to go and configure the router step by step. I did a part of it, but many other things are still to be done. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to open the router and show you all the commands that are needed to be done in the router. I only did the ports and Abanat. So here I open the router and I'll go one by one. They are all old commands. Step B, enter configuration mode. Assign device name to a router. What's the device name? I forgot, Saraha. What's the device name? R1. So let's just go ahead and do these things. Conf t, host name, R1. Done with the first step. Disable DNS lookup. No IP domain lookup. No IP domain lookup. Done with step 2. D. Assign class as the privilege executed in encrypted password. Enable secret class. Assign Cisco console password. Line console 0. Password Cisco. Login. Assign Cisco VTY password and enable login. Line VTY 0 to 15. Password Cisco. Login. Enable all clear text passwords. I go back to the global configuration. Service. Password encryption. Create a banner warning message. Banner. MOTD. Any warning message. Secure system. No prisoners. I added a message. Configure and activate both interfaces in the router. I did this. The first thing I did is giving IP addresses. Configure an interface description for each interface. This is a simple command. It's a good idea to give a description for the interface. For example, G01, in addition to the IP address, I can give it a description which is, for example, LAN interface or whatever description. So here I can say interface G01. It's very simple, just the word description. And then you type any text. Just the word description, for example, LAN S1 interface. I can go now to another port, to the other port, G00. Description again, admin interface. Let me admin LAN interface. I gave descriptions to both ports of the router. It just makes sure you see these descriptions later. Save the running config and the startup config file. To save with the running config, you need to come out, copy, run, start. So all the running configuration is working, is saved now. Set the clock on the router. We forgot this command. Clock, this is the command, set. If you don't know what is the command, use question mark. If you don't know what's the command, use the question mark. So clock set, I need to provide hours. 13, 23, 10 seconds. Okay, still incomplete. Use a question mark. I need to enter the day. The day today is 12. And I know the syntax, but if you don't know it, keep doing question mark. We did this like a month ago, 2021. Now we set the clock of the routers. Can you ping, the next question, step N. Can you ping BCB from the command prompt window on BCA? I will go to BCA and try to ping BCB here. I know the IP address of BCB, ping 192.168.03. I believe the ping should be successful. I don't see any problem why the ping is not going to be successful. Simply because both networks 192.168.0x and 192.168.1x both are connected to the same router. If they are both connected to the same router, then the router considers them directly connected LANs, and it can forward packets between the two different LANs. How to know if the router knows both LANs? Go to the router and use a command we have used many times last lab, show IP route. The answer will be, okay, here, there are two directly connected networks. This is 192.168.0.0 and 192.168.1.0. So these are two directly connected networks to the router. I can even from B ping the BCA, ping 192.168.13. Successful ping, since the router knows how to forward packets between the two different LANs. So the ping was successful. Why? Because the router is ready. Okay. In part 3, you will use the show commands to retrieve information from the router and the switch. طيب يا بنات, show version gives you a lot of things. يعني if you want to know something about the switch or the router, you go to the switch or the router, you go to the CLI here, and you just do one command, show version. This show version will tell you a lot of stuff about the model of the switch. Okay, so this one is the switch. Very few things I see here. Okay, show version. Let us look at it. Show version. Cisco switch. C2960. This is the model number. Which version? 15. Okay. Compiled Wednesday, June 13. Let us see this one here. Memory, for example. This is the operating system file. The operating system file. You will see a lot of messages, but let me show you the most important things. The processors. How many Ethernet interfaces? How many fast Ethernet interfaces? How many gigabit Ethernet interfaces? How much flash memory you have? How much, what's the MAC address? Okay, base Ethernet. What is the motherboard? Whatever. Model number. Top, so many things. So many things about the switch you see here. If you go to the router again, you can use the same command, show version. And let us see what we get on the router here. Okay. Bueno, hon. Cisco iOS, the model C1900. This is the router model, version 15.1. Okay. Cisco 1945. Uptime since I started it, 16 minutes. طيب. System image file. The operating system file is available here. Last reload, normal. And so many other information about the device. Let us see some of them. How much memory I have in the device. You see this memory. Okay. How much gigabit Ethernet interfaces? What is the dynamic memory available here? Tamam. How much total non-volatile memory I have? How much flash I have? You see here, flash memory. All these are information about the device. All of them I got only using the show version command. There are so many things like this. But now, with the show version command, if they ask you what is the iOS image, you should be able to answer. How much DRAM memory? You should be able to answer. How much NVRAM memory? You should be able to answer. How much flash memory is also available to you here? For example, here, you can see here we have flash memory of this much. Does that make sense? How much dynamic RAM? How much non-volatile RAM? What is the model number of the switch? And so on. For the router display IP route, we showed you this one. And you know what is the code C from last lab, which is directly connected. Now they want to know, is a router G01, is it up or down? And what is the MAC address of this port? And what is the bandwidth of this port? To know everything about this interface, you just ask the router about it. Show interface G01, that's it. And let's look at this. Description, you remember ya banat, description, the one I added. You see it now here. And before that, this is the MAC address of the port. And this is the internet address I gave to the port. This is the bandwidth of the port. They rarely ask you about other things, but now we know it's up. It's up because it's no shut. Description, the MAC address, and the bandwidth. We know all these things about this port. So I believe I answered all the questions about this one in one command. Now they want you to verify that the ports are up or down. The best command to use to see all the ports of a router, again and again, very useful, show IP interface brief. So now in this router, I see gigabit Ethernet 00. This is the IP address. It's up. Gigabit Ethernet 01. It's up also. So this is what I use this command for. Tamam. And if you go to the switch, this command is not that useful, by the way, because you have many ports on the switch, maybe 24, maybe 48, but you can see everything about the switch. You can see everything about the switch. Tamam. Now they ask you an important question. If the router is port G01 is down, which command do you make it up? It's very simple command to make it up, no shut. I believe we have seen this command for a month almost.